Uh, Good afternoon. This is Sylvester with GRS Technology Solutions. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go over how to protect yourself from the dark web. So a couple of goals of this time here we have today should run about 30 minutes. It might go over. We will have some question and answer at the end. So feel free to type in your questions anytime in the chat. So in essence, kind of three things we're looking to walk away with. One being having an understanding of what dark web technology is, and we'll demystify a little bit of those concepts. We'll take a look at the good and the bad of this technology and the importance of privacy and anonymity on the internet, and also how you can prevent your business by being susceptible to different forces that operate on the dark web, and different services that we can help you and your business use to enhance your protection and add another layer of defense against the illegal activities that occur there. So just to review a little bit of myself, my name is, again, Sylvester. I'm the president and CTO here at GRS. I've been here for about 4 years now with the company. I've been in the IT industry for over 10 years, avid technology, security, and cyber enthusiast for over 20 years. That dates me back to the 8th grade. We are a Microsoft business partner, strategist for 365 and Azure. So, about 20 years ago, I was in a way managing about 200 computers or so. And these were university computers. And I wasn't moonlighting for an IT company at the time in the 8th grade, but in essence, what I was a part of at the time was an underground internet community, and for purposes of sharing files, music, video at the time, and there were means to exploit certain computers. And there was really a lack of security, good IT at the time, and it was so I have an understanding of what it means to kind of have new technology, be interested in and use it for means that may or may not be good for some. So from there, went on to web development, and just up until now, still very versed with Microsoft Windows security, and not much has changed, but we're entering, I think, right now, a new era of internet and technology, and for people to become educated on that and different ways to protect yourself and prepare for the future, not only personally, but for your business as well. So let's start with the kind of an overview of what the internet is. So we can break it down into three different aspects. For one, we'd call the surface web is the top layer of the internet. So this sort of means there's no security, no password needed to access any of these websites. About 4% of the web consists of the surface web. So this is free and open to anyone. The deep web is social media sites, banking, company sites, cloud applications. So these sites typically will require you to use a set of credentials, a username, a password. This takes up about 90% of the internet at the moment. Lastly, the dark web, which has been termed for a kind of secret location of the internet that people do bad things on. So this makes up about 6% of the internet at the moment. And you have to have certain means to gain access to this, but it's free and accessible to anyone. So basically, the internet, we sometimes call it the web. If you think of it, it's really just a web of computers that connect to each other. And it means for you to transfer, download, communicate content. So content being voice, text, pictures, videos, music. You're using your computer to get access to another computer to pull or view certain information. So back when the internet was just starting out, through dial-up was one of the first ways a lot of people got access to the internet through AOL. using a modem, dial-up. I remember the days of the discs. I'd get AOL discs at least, I don't know, I think once a month. But from that, we migrated on to DSL, which was a little faster, and now to cable, and we're at fiber. So the demands of the internet was having to essentially meet the demands of computing technology. So we had to get faster and faster for these larger files, more media. And if you remember, sort of, those were the early days when no one really knew much about the internet. There were different ways to get access to it. There was, I remember I used personally Prodigy, there was CompuServe, and then on from there, you would get dial-up, and then you would probably use a browser. Netscape was a popular one at the time. So even in the early stages of that, we're looking at mid-90s, early 90s, there was its own set of problems that opened up, especially with bad things on the internet. Essentially, some sites you would go to, you could be hit with pop-ups incessantly, like a 10, 20, and they wouldn't stop. Sometimes you just have to pull the plug on the computer, it'd be so bad. But over time, we came up with solutions to fix that. Now, pretty much commonplace is add pop-up blockers on all browsers. So let's look at the surface web a little more in depth. Again, no credentials needed to get on these sites. It's free. Google's an example of this. Where it's free access, you type and search what you want, they give you a list of results. So a company like Google has, over time, developed into one of the kind of prominent technology companies. I remember they started out with Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, there was Lycos, all these sites, but this was the site because just of the way that they use the technology and search strings and terms to really find what you're looking for. You know, at this point, it's almost the Walmart or Amazon of navigating and just accessing the quote internet. But that's not all the internet is. And now at least on the first pages of Google searches, you have to sift through ads, you're sifting through targeted websites based on your habits and things of that nature. So, you know, we're stepping away from, you know, more freedom on the internet towards a area where it's more personalized and you're targeted, almost narrowing kind of what you can do. But right now, this is just almost dominating everything we do. It turned into a search engine to now operating your cell phone, your navigational systems, video, email. They're even rolling out internet service across the country. So, you know, with things like that, there's concerns for privacy, monopolization of content, web experiences being tailored based on your habits, your speech, your likes, your dislikes. And so you're not able to maybe navigate those unknown roads anymore. There's less freedom. There's maybe more tracking involved with what you do with a site like that. The deep web, again, that's takes up around 80 to 90% of all web content. Would be considered invisible web. So this isn't accessible by web searches or not publicly accessible. So you typically will need a username and a password to gain access to sites. So think of it as your bank website, shopping sites, company email, social networks. This is a level of, let's say, protection against other people getting access to your information. Of course, with these sites, you agree to certain terms when you sign up, and that's a whole different story. But again, this is, excuse me, really what we're looking at here in terms of security concerns would be credentials, passwords, and usernames. I mean, that is going to be the primary way that you authenticate yourself on these websites. Moving on to the dark web. So again, this is a kind of a new area. A lot of it is put on mainstream media as something that is bad, evil, not good. There's a ton of activity on it that isn't portrayed in a good light. And what I want to be able to do is kind of demystify that a little bit, explain the good that can come from that in terms of enhancing our freedoms and privacy, but also address again, just like in the early days of internet, there's bad things that will go on, and then there will be responses to that. And right now we're in an area where we need to start looking at our defenses and what we can do. So what is the dark web? Well, essentially think of it as another layer of the internet. It requires special software to access these sites. Now, the most popular and kind of predominant tool is called Tor. Tor just stands for the onion router, onion, like the vegetable. So essentially what this does, it encrypts your IP address, which is your footprint on the internet. It will put you through different relays, essentially, to anonymize who you are when you access a particular site. Now, this was originally developed by the Navy back in the 70s for means of transferring information, because obviously security concerns there being you don't want to see that you're sending something from a Navy-based system. So after that, in the 80s, it entered the university space, commercial space in the 1990s, and right now about 80% of it is funded by the government. So it allows for anonymous communication, again, protection from who you are and your location as well. The main purpose being to avoid the analysis of the internet traffic. It's not a means to encrypt and hide your data, but really to mask who it's coming from. So in essence, protecting yourself. Now, a little bit about how it works, just very simply, you enter an address and it goes to what we call a relay, and it bounces it to another one, and then to another one, and then on to your end recipient. Now, without getting too technical, that essentially is a way for you to get to a particular place and not be traceable per se. So how do people use Tor for good? Okay, they can protect their privacy from, let's say, marketers or identity thieves. You can protect your communication from maybe certain corporations, if you're a nonprofit, or you have certain, let's say, humanitarian concerns, especially in different countries where certain things may not be allowed. You will be prosecuted if you communicate or talk in a particular way about the government or any type of authority where you're at. You're able to research, let's say, sensitive topics. I mean, nowadays everything's heavily scrutinized by your internet service provider. This would provide a means if you're for doing, say, valid research, the ability to kind of mask those searches. In a way also to avoid censorship. So a lot of these things is in part why people are kind of turning towards this, and unfortunately we hear just the bad side of it in the news. Right now, you may be familiar with, of course, Edward Snowden. This was his primary means of transmitting certain documents that he released, describing how the NSA operates and some of the programs. Another example would be a country like China, where everyone is heavily controlled in terms of what they can see on the internet. This could be a way for them to gain access outside of that level of restriction. So moving on, there is, of course, a bad side of this type of internet as well. As soon as you can become anonymized and untraceable, think about it as being you're now invisible. So if in real life you had the opportunity to become invisible, that opens up a lot of different things you could do. You couldn't be bothered by certain people. You could walk in peace by yourself. If you had good intentions, you could potentially, thwart different bad activities that might occur, crimes. Or on the flip side, you could be invisible and sneak into a bank and take some money. So think about it in that sense, where, of course, any new technology just being a tool to use, it depends on the person using it and their intent. So one of the activities that's pretty large, and what is almost known for at the moment, is a black market of purchases. So anything from drugs to hacker guides to credit card numbers, social security numbers, all of that is up for sale essentially on these websites. They're commerce-based, and the primary means of payment on these websites will be a Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency. And why use cryptocurrency? Well, essentially what that is again, an anonymous form of transactions. So it's a digital type of coin, which now can be exchanged for real cash. This has been around for a very long time, even before kind of Bitcoin hit the news in terms of the price it went to. This was a means of financial transactions on the internet, completely anonymized. Now, it doesn't allow you to perform these, let's say, financial transactions with complete anonymity. There is a trace, there's a public ledger of every transaction that occurs through Bitcoin, and it's publicly available. So if you had an address and you sent something to another address, that's publicly available. If you heard of the Silk Road, that was probably the largest online site utilizing the Tor network to exchange drugs and other illegal trade. Now, the owner of the site, he was actually apprehended. He was traced down based on his address that he was using to transfer funds. Now, of course, these should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I mean, this is basically an illegal activity, even though it works and it's in a way anonymized, it doesn't make it legal. So as you can see, there's things here such as credit card numbers, phones, CVVs, and they'll give you the dollar amount here as well. So what I'm going to go over is a little bit of sort of what the cost of this is, retail value, if you want to call it that. A credit card utilizing, let's say, track data, the chip that's on your card, which includes the code, the expiration date, your zip code. Those can be for sale from anywhere to $1,000 to $2,000. Online banking account, a full set of credentials, PayPal accounts, say Amazon prepaid cards. These are all up for sale, again, around $1,000 to $2,000. And the way this happens, essentially, this data gets compromised in some fashion, let's say through a website breach, a hack attempt, a ransomware that affects thousands of computers, and they pull these credentials. So everyone's familiar with Target and how they were breached, and then a bunch of other companies that fell into line with that. And we were all personally affected. I remember one year, I got 5 letters from companies saying that, oh, your information was compromised. Here's a free 1-year trial to like agent ID, personal ID. And that's useful on a personal level to keep track of your credit history if there's attempts of fraud and things like that. So another problem that we see too is identity theft. And what this is essentially, if they get your social security number, a driver's license, passport, and you could basically buy total new identity, and yeah, it's up for sale. Another popular activity as well are scams, business scams. So 89% of legitimate fraud guides can be used to scam or defraud individuals or businesses. Now, these are basically walkthrough guides on how to scam your doctor, insurance companies, different businesses, individuals. So these are up for sale and regularly traded among these online black market sites. Another big issue that we run into is ransomware. So for instance, the CryptoLocker virus that was pretty prevalent about a year or so ago. These are types of programs that are developed and, again, exchanged on these websites. You can actually, there are some sites that you can rent a hacker. I saw one website through research, it was called that, Rent a Hacker, and it's about $500. You can essentially destroy a person's credit, a whole host of things if you want. You can pay for a ransomware attack on a series of individuals or companies. So there's about 6,000 new threats every day, and these are constantly changing. The delivery methods are always changing on how these get these software packages out. And again, it'll take hold of your computer, force you to pay with Bitcoin to unencrypt your files, and then if lucky, you may get your files unencrypted, or they just simply take your money. I never recommend that. Always recommend having a good backup in place with same-day recovery, where you can revert if needed to a day before previously, and that's really your main protection against that, and good endpoint protection too. So again, a lot of this kind of dark web has seemingly made it more easily doable for people who want to engage in these types of activities. So almost every Fortune 500 company has had some level of exposure on the dark web. So like I said, Target was a big one back in the day. If you make, and to be honest, you'll have more over time. Some people tend to use their business email as a way to sign up for certain sites, make certain purchases, just because it could become convenient. Especially if you own your own business, you may use your business email to buy tickets or airline flights, or buy apps on your phone, or shop. And then unfortunately, some people use the same password across all these sites. So one level of compromise from maybe a purchase you made on Target or Home Depot, and it was used with your business email and your password. So now that's kind of free reign, and you're opening yourself up to exposure in that sense. And all these accounts, all this fraud that occurs, all that data will get dumped and traded on the dark web. So what we're looking at, what they're estimating by 2025 is about 100 billion connected IoT devices. This is really going to ramp up kind of the level of protection that we need to be concerned about on the surface web. It'll just add another point of entry for data to be captured. So what we can also look towards is maybe allowing for a technology like Tor to advance how we're doing things on the internet, to better help us keep communication private amongst businesses, allow for protections from outside groups, competitors, and people with malintent. Personally, I see that can be used in the future in some sense in business. I don't know how, but it's really a response to where we're headed right now, which is sort of just giving everything up to these large companies, and basically everything about us, our lives, our businesses. And some people say there's really nothing to hide. They don't have a concern about privacy. But if you think about it, if you think of privacy in terms of your home, you come home from work, I don't think you leave the door open. You probably close the door. On top of that, you use a lock, maybe a deadbolt. You then have a security system or an alarm and a camera. If you have cash or valuable items, you may not keep them in plain view in your home. You may put them in a safe. So even in that sense, in our home, privacy is important. We're protecting the things that we hold close to us, and we add different layers to do that. So if you think about it again, like if you were invisible in the real world, what might you do? Okay, if you want to avoid somebody having prying eyes, or always looking over your shoulder, or scrutinizing your behavior, you kind of lose a sense of freedom with that, and having a level of anonymity can work in your favor. So I think the responsibility that we have in this new age of technology, it's constantly increasing the speed of information, and even how we run our lives is going to be very important to also put up a level of, let's say, awareness about security and defense for the future. So what are some ways you can protect yourself, let's say from the dark web and these types of activities. So one way, if you think about it, again, when the internet was started, it was just wide open. There was all this activity, and over time, with new technology was developed to circumvent those types of things, like pop-ups. Antivirus was a response to malicious software that was being created, and now that's just commonplace. You have to have good endpoint protection on your computer, as those threats constantly change and still change. With the new layer of the internet, the dark web, or being accessible through Tor, it's similar. So there needs to be new methods to defend against different activities that occur. So if you think about it in this sense, where you know, if you're a victim of identity theft or things of that nature, there's really no policing that can be done. Just as though we can call the police now if something affects our home, there's not much that we can do in terms of going after a hacker you can't be traceable. So really, we need to have maybe more professionals to police this new internet. And there are these individuals now, proponents that are looking at ways to stop this activity. Maybe scour the internet or the dark web for information that's been compromised, allowing you to get alerted if, let's say, your email or password is being traded. That would be a huge benefit to you and your business if that can be tracked. So number one thing you could start with is a cybersecurity risk assessment. So basically, if you just think about all the different ways that you can potentially be compromised, using things like a personal Dropbox account for activities. You can ask if you're monitoring login activities of your employees. Are people allowed to check on personal email on their business workstations? Are there different threat vectors that are potentially exposed within your network? Sometimes just bad things can happen from an uninformed employee. And you could also, worst case, have bad employees stealing data from your company. So, you know, you have to make a plan. There's no perfect plan, but you have to start somewhere. And it could be as simple as, you know, start setting new policies within the company, educating staff, having an IT policy. We can certainly help everyone with that here at GRS. So number two, implement a multi-layer security strategy. So essentially, training your employees. Train the employees on different phishing scams. We can provide that for you as well. A campaign where your entire set of employees will get an email, and it will be a phishing email, but it's a test to see who will actually follow through with clicking that link and entering in their company password for their email address. How are they managing passwords at your company? Is it an Excel spreadsheet? Is it more secure means? Who has access? Also, training for employees and how their surroundings and who are they giving their account credentials to. So it's very important at the ground level, and it's more behavior-based training that needs to be done first before looking at a lot of the other types of protection. So ultimately, you would be implementing a multi-layer security strategy. So touching on this, again, the end user training, you want to have protection for the email to circumvent any employee who would, you know, not follow the policy of typing in their password on unknown sites. There's ways to filter the internet, who can visit what on their computers in your office. Should you get on Facebook or should you not? Also having a managed firewall with security settings, monitoring it, attacks, having good threat prevention built in. Mobile device management, if you have company phones, are these being managed? And in what sense? Can they be remote wiped? When and where should they be used? Are they encrypted? Also, a SIEM which is short for Security Information and Event Management software. So what this essentially does, will pull all the logs from your computers, your network, and give us detailed information of any type of activities that may be suspect. And these can be reviewed and monitored regularly for suspicious activity that might be occurring on the network. And then finally, at the kind of hardware computer level, we're looking at solid endpoint protection along with patch management, which is security updates, and basically making sure that their computer stays up to date with any critical fixes that might be needed, and having basically a full-on maintenance plan and management. And that's what we do here with GRS. So what we're offering today, since we came to this webinar, is we're actually able to provide a free dark web search on your web domain. So your company domain, we can do a search on that and see what email addresses, if any, have been compromised and are traded on the dark web. So what you can do is send us an email at events@grstechnologysolutions.com, and we will do a search on your domain and provide you that list and see what emails potentially have been compromised. Now, if you have other friends or other businesses that you would like to search on their behalf, by all means, so you can add that too, and we'll be more than happy to send you that information. So let me go over a couple questions here that we got so far. So regarding, we emailed everybody about added security layers that they can add to their service. And two of them were advanced threat protection and an endpoint anti-ransomware endpoint protection. So, and how can they protect you from the dark web? So let me start with the advanced threat protection. Essentially, what that will do is sort of create a sandbox where people who click links in emails or open attachments, Microsoft, if you're using this as a 365, Office 365 service, they will check those links, check the attachments for validity, any threats, before that gets executed and opened on the computer. So if it's a, let's say, because what that essentially will allow for is passwords and account information to be compromised. If somebody's not aware of what they're opening and providing their credentials, they could be added to a set of databases that will get traded on the dark web. So that's your first protection kind of upfront through email. The anti-ransomware software, that's a good protection against cryptoware, ransomware threats, programs to get executed on your computer. These encrypt the files on your computer, on your network, and the way they operate is based on an algorithm. Now, what the endpoint protection does, it catches that behavior running on the computer and stops it before it spreads into something worse. So again, these are programs and viruses that are traded, paid for on the dark web, and then executed out here on the normal internet. So another question here, if your information is on the dark web, is there anything you can do to remove it? So not in essence, you can't really request it to be removed, but really your first course of action is going to be to address those accounts that are there, change their password. Then look into considering adding a second layer of authentication beyond just the password. Not using business emails for things other than business, training employees, things like that. But the service that we can actually provide is continual monitoring of these databases that are traded. And if your company email shows up on those month to month, then you're going to get alerted. And so it's sort of a real-time monitor against any new active compromises of accounts. So another question here, How can you protect online banking, paying bills online, and credit card safety? So basically with online banking, even your personal accounts and or business accounts, most banks now allow for two-factor authentication, meaning your password along with another form of authentication. Most common is a text message code. So if you just have that means available on any of your accounts, personal accounts, certainly implement that. Credit card, our recommendation for online purchases is to not use a card, debit card directly linked to your bank account. Certainly with a business bank account, that's not something that would be insured if there was a loss of funds. So make use of an American Express for online purchases and maybe not tie directly your bank account to anything that could be exposed on the internet. Another question about the service part of, is this dark web monitoring service part of the monthly service contract? This is not currently part of the all-inclusive IT package. This would be an add-on service for monitoring the dark web for any compromises of your business email. So I do have some pricing I can send individually. If you want to shoot an email at events, we can take care of that and discuss a couple options for your company. Okay. Let's see. Let's see for any other questions. Okay. All right, I don't think that's it for today. We're up at 1:37. I thank you all for joining. If you have any questions, you can contact me directly. We can discuss further what we talked about today. Look into a dark web search for your company if you'd like, or if you're just interested in the tour of the technology we discussed. Be more than happy to answer any questions. That's it. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and this will be recorded, so if you want a copy of it, you can reach out to us and we'll send it to you. Thank you very much. Bye.